Justice for all.
Right, we did open in public session and went directly into non-public, so I will take public participation now. Do we have any public participation? All right. I have minutes of December 9th, public session. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Motion by
So
Mr.
moved.
Lewis. Second by Mrs. McElhenney. Ms. McElhenney, excuse me. Any errors or omissions? All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to abstain. I have public session, non-public session 2 from December 9th.
Yes. So moved.
Second.
By Ms. McElhenney, second by Mr. Lewis. Any errors or omissions? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
I'll abstain.
I'm going to abstain as well. I have December 9th, non-public session 3. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Frieda, second by Mr. Lewis. Any errors or omissions?
I think Ms. Begonia's name has an I, B-I-G-O-N-I-A.
B-I-G-O-N-I-A, yes.
Right.
Okay. All right. Any other corrections? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Abstain? I'm going to abstain. Mr. Frieda, are you abstaining? It says
I
that
will
you weren't
abstain.
here. 2 abstentions. December 9th, non-public session 4.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. McElhenney. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Mr. Lewis. Any changes?
The first amount, in the year and the first amount is wrong. I'll have to look that up for you.
Okay.
And my name has 2 N's.
Oh, yep, I got it.
Should we table these until we get the right amount, or?
Is that?
Yeah, you
I
can't
could get
pass.
it for you by the end of the meeting. I just don't have my
Yeah,
okay.
laptop up right
I'll
now.
make a motion to table till the end of meeting.
Second.
Well, hold on, I have the numbers. The first one is.
It's the first
We
one
got
that's
year one,
wrong.
Penny.
I think it might just, I think the 5 might need to be a 6, but I'd like,
164, 794, 74, year 1.
Yeah,
yeah,
it should be in the
So
sixth
it's
then.
1-6.
that sounds right.
165, 72, 59 for year 2. And 165, 754, 03 for year 3.
So it's just that 5 should be a 6.
Well, year,
Year 1.
Year 1 should be 164,
what
not
was
one.
year 2, Penny?
Year 2, 165, 72, 59. Yeah.
So what was the year one?
Yeah, just the year 1 should be 164, 794, 74. Any other corrections? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
I should be, my name is missing from the upset list there.
Oh.
I didn't catch who motioned that one.
It was,
McElhenney Lewis was the second.
Thank you.
thank you. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
I'll abstain.
And 2 abstentions. All right, performance contract presentation.
Do we have
5?
minutes on
Oh,
number
I don't
5?
I don't have 5.
Oh, here.
Oh, I do have 5, sorry. All right. Minutes of December 9th, non-public session 5. We need to add Stan to that.
Well, he's on,
He's
he's on
on,
the.
he came in late that night, I think.
He's on present, we need to take him
I
out.
am.
Oh, okay.
All right, do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second.
Motion
Just
by
my name.
Ms. McElhenney, second by Mr. Frieda.
And let's fix Janice's name.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have a 6?
Well, it's on some of them.
Which is the next one here?
All right, all those in favor?
What are you doing now?
We're still on
5?
5.
Okay.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
And 1 abstention. Right. And I have non-public session 6. It's not on the agenda for negotiations. You have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Changes?
If we could just change the word "would" in the second sentence to "could be available," I don't think,
Right.
Okay.
Okay. All right, all those in favor? One abstention.
Who was the motion in the second?
It was Mr. Frida and Ms. McElhenney.
Actually, it was Mr. Lewis.
Lewis, yeah.
Mr. Lewis.
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
It's all good.
Thank you. All right. Do you need the overhead or anything, Ms.?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Just more some clarity, I guess. But do you want to take the podium?
Yes, please. And just introduce yourself.
Okay, get going.
I'd like to thank Tom Seekins from Siemens, oops, excuse me, that should be off, who has graciously offered to join us tonight to answer some of the questions that were raised at the last board meeting regarding performance contracting and the costs of audits by residents and board members. I will open it up to Tom. I've given him the background of kind of what the initial questions were, but certainly if there are additional questions or things that you would like him to speak to, please do take advantage of having him here tonight to answer your questions.
All right.
All right.
I guess I just go a quick background on. So Tom Seekins, I manage the performance contracting business, the energy business for Siemens in Maine and Hampshire, Portsmouth and Scarborough, Maine, and I've been with Siemens for 15 years with just the school market. So I have the vertical market of just schools in Maine and Hampshire. So just about for the past 15 years, every energy project we've done, I've been part of it. So we've done a lot of these energy audits, the analysis. Performance contracting business in general has been around since about 1980 when we came into legislation across the country. So back then, when of course energy costs were fluctuating like crazy, it became a real popular way of just paying off projects. Today, it is without a doubt, the most popular way for schools to fund capital infrastructure type projects. So larger infrastructure. It could be windows, roofs, brick and mortar, anything with the existing structure without building a new, addition or anything separate. It's everything within the confines of your existing structures. And the concept, of course, is governed by the state of New Hampshire, just like the state of Maine. You have legislation which you followed. You issued the RFQ for interested ESCOs or energy services companies like ours to basically explain why they would be a logical fit for Farmington schools. You got all that information. You had held interviews based on respondents and did some background checks. I know Ruth Ellen made several phone calls to other districts that we've done these with, and there's been hundreds of projects we've done, but I know that you've made contact with Barrington and Oyster River and some of the others. So that's the process you chose. And then after the selection, you enter what we call a letter of intent, pretty standard. A letter of intent is basically that. It's an intention to develop a project. It's not a contract of any kind. And that's one of the reasons why this process is so popular among schools, federal entities. The federal government uses it. We've done every major hospital in Hampshire actually has used performance-based contracting. It's the sheer nature of the non-committal aspect of it, which is what schools obviously love. You're not committing to any funds up until the time that you've developed a project, we're several months away from that. It's a true pump the brakes approach where the letter of intent spells out that we're going to do an analysis on all your structures and come up with a bunch of ideas, as many as we can come up with. Nothing too outlandish because you're not going to spend money engineering and doing an analysis for things that'll never happen. That kind of process is what you would call the old energy audit. If you could do an energy audit, which we just don't do those anymore. If we're asked to do it, we respectfully decline because it ends up being a 3-ring binder on someone like Larry's desk that tells you that you have deferred maintenance, it's millions of dollars in work, no surprise there, and then you got to find a way to fund it. So that's what we're trying to do is capture all the things that are imminent. They're issues, they're things that you have to address in the very near future. And the things that you don't, of course, now you've got a capital plan, right? So while we're doing this analysis, which we've already started, we're holding all that cost. But we show you the cost along the way. Our cost is very easy to delineate because it's an hourly. Our engineers put their time to a job. We only have 2 or 3 we have Kevin Christensen in this case and Carrie Worms, too, as a lead. And everyone else that we bring under, they're not really generating any cost to us unless we ask them to do anything. But we don't ask them to do anything without your approval first. Example of that would be if you wanted to change the way you ventilate a school, right? You've got old ventilation. And if we wanted to go with a different type, that would require taking it out of the classroom and going on the roof. We would want to have you would want to have as well, a third-party structural engineer take a look at the roof, give their structural opinion, and stamp it so that everyone feels good about it, and you're not putting anyone in harm's way. So it's a life safety kind of concern. That would be, say it's $5,000 to hire their engineer. We would run that by you first before just saying that we're going to do this, because we're passing that cost along. We don't mark it up, but we let you know that we're encumbering costs and that you should be aware of that. The nice thing about the process is that, this audit or analysis would take around 90 to 120 days, even though we've been looking at this thing for probably 3 years. We've literally been doing some of the analysis and looking at budget numbers and coming up with ideas for 2 or 3 years. And now we actually have a project, a number dedicated to develop something. Something doesn't have to be of any size. There's no minimum requirement. It is what fits within your budget, right? So, again, if you talk to some of the colleagues that you did, there is no way to do this any more fiscally responsible than you are through a performance-based contract, 100%. There is no way that you're going to do things cheaper or develop a project of any size without encumbering any cost or committing the district to any cost. All that analysis is based on our reputation of saying, we feel like this could be a good opportunity. I've said no to doing analysis before if we feel like there's no project there, even with service customers like yourself. So we wouldn't really enter into anything if we didn't think that we had a pretty good story to tell with you guys at the end. But again, that risk is on the company, and that's the risk that I manage. So we want to develop a project, and we say we're just doing another one with North Conway Schools right now, our third one. It's a pretty easy sell, right? Where North Conway is a pretty known customer of ours. We're going to develop XYZ measures. Here's the cost we're probably going to encumber internally. Do we want that risk? We do the same thing here. I went and said that we have a $0 buyout letter of intent. We're going to develop a project with these folks. We've been servicing the buildings for a number of years. Here are the opportunities. And we feel like we can keep the cost down because it's pretty local. Our techs and everyone live there, so it's low-cost risk for us. And the intention is to help you guys develop a capital improvement plan for the next 5 to 10 years, 15 years. So there's school districts we've done Phase 5, Phase 6. Oyster River, we've done 3 projects. I'm going to Barrington on Thursday night to talk to those folks. We've done a couple projects there. I mean, every school district you do several. Once you do the first one, it becomes a lot easier to do subsequent phases because you see the process, you know how it works. So once Larry's already experienced going through the buildings with our engineers. Kevin's brought through lighting contractors, electrical contractors. So I think he's coming here again to look at the controls, you said, right, tomorrow? Or building envelope, okay. I mean, we tried, we need internally, we're required by our own procurement team to get at least 3 bids. And they have to even bid to us electronically through our electronic portal so that it's fair and balanced, so there's no kind of games being played by sheet metal contractors that say, well, there's no sense to bid on those projects because they always give it to XYZ company. So now we do it where it goes through a portal, and then we can evaluate the numbers. We show you guys all the numbers on a spreadsheet and show you the paybacks, incentives that are available by Eversource or State of New Hampshire or any other grant, or we've already helped apply for several, some successful, some not, but endless amount of time spent on that because it's worth the time. If it's, we can get you free money, that's what better project is there than that. So that's kind of like the snapshot. And then once we're done with the development around 190 to 120 days, as we're approaching a list of measures. And for example, the last one we did with Hopkinton Schools, we finished last year, we looked at 100 measures, and I think they did about 35 of them. Not all of them are big, some of them very small, but it helped them create a list of things that were still remaining, right? So if it's air conditioning unit that's R22 and that's no longer available, it's a toxic waste type thing, and you're mandated by the state and government to at some point evacuate all that and go to the new refrigerant. That's all laid out, so everyone knows it. You kind of create a plan, and that's all part of the process. After that analysis, probably 3/4 of the way through it, we've met with you guys a couple times to show you some of the things that we're looking at. Are we still on the same sheet of music? Of course, we met with you a couple times internally to say, all right, here's the things that we know that are eminent in terms of importance. The big elephants in the room, like a boiler that's about to fail, or things that you have inherent problems with. But the classroom environment is the most important part of the entire thing. A healthy, thriving learning environment for the kids and staff. So it's 15 to CFM per fresh air per occupant or just present person. 40-foot candles at the desk level. The right thermal aspect of the classroom, 68 to 71 degrees. All that stuff that's the goal, to meet the academic standards. We've met with you guys. You guys pick out the scope that you like. We've come up with some pricing. Then you start to look at the financing options. Typically, it's done through a tax-exempt lease purchase. That's about 99% of how these are done. The reason why, 4-letter word of a bond is not really a preferred method by schools, obviously. There's a cost to issue a bond. There is no cost to issue a tax-exempt lease purchase. There's a risk adversity to a tax-exempt that's very popular. That is, every year that you appropriate your budget every single year. Banks realize through a tax-exempt lease purchase that there's a non-appropriation clause built into it. So they understand they're taking on the risk of your project from year 1 to whatever you deem that you want is your term. The state of New Hampshire allows you to go 20 years. Usually around 15 to 17 or 18 years is kind of the sweet spot we see, so 15 to 18 for schools, for financing. Every single year, that bank understands there's a non-appropriation clause that basically spells out that you don't know what your budget is 3 years from now. So if something were to happen, you could literally take your boilers back and then you're not responsible. So another reason why it's a pretty popular method, because you're not bonded to the payment. The bank does give you a whole year for no payment, so to do your construction. So basically, they back a little bit of interest. You see it. It's very unambiguous process. You see everything is very black and white. The bids all come back to you for the banks, because Siemens will bid on it too. We're the only ESCO that's an actual bank, so our rates are typically very good, but we bid right to you, so you see the rates, you open them, and then select the bank. But that whole year of construction is pretty key, because you can fall into 2 fiscal years in the school district without having to commit any funds. So technically speaking, you really may not have to come up with any cost if you elect to for almost 2 years, 2 fiscal years, at least a year and a half actual calendar year. So once again, all that cost is carried. We don't put interest on it. We just hold the cost. And then once the project is selected, we roll that cost into the financing, and you see what that is. So that way you never have to come up with the engineering costs like you typically would to have like an architectural and engineering firm do an analysis. That's kind of, I just gave you like a 3-year process in a nutshell, but hopefully that made sense.
I'm not sure what the questions were. Have we?
The big question, I think, was around the performance contract analysis, getting into it. How does that work? Where does that get rolled in? And then one of the things that I think is important too is that the savings that we have from the energy improvements that we make can then in turn pay for the improvements that we've made. So it doesn't mean that there's necessarily this huge jump in the budget either to do that. And those savings are also guaranteed by Siemens.
100%. Great point. Yeah, I skipped over that. I probably skipped over that, didn't I? So because of that, you see what I mean by the risk adversity and the fiscal responsibility of how this nature of this business is so attractive, because you're not just saying the debt service is X and we need to add $2 million to our budget to do this project, to do these boilers and windows. You're looking at this from an annual perspective, and you're saying the energy savings could be $52,000 by doing all of these measures. So you keep that money the same in your budget, your energy budget, right? And you're just taking that $52,000 and you're putting it towards your tax-exempt lease purchase. So that may pay off the entire thing. So you may be budget neutral right from the beginning. What we see inherently is most every school system that we do these with, you've got obviously way more problems than you've got money to do, right? And everybody knows that. So it's just a matter of picking what is probably the most important thing to address right now. you have that ability to look at things and say, if we have money in this budget that we've been budgeting for boiler repair, HVAC, general maintenance, can we use that and slide this over here? And now we have $61,000 to pay between energy savings and operational savings. So then you can go back into our tool, everything's broken out individually, and click in fire alarm improvements at the high school, right? Click that back in there and say, okay, now we can do new smoke detectors and pull stations at the exits if we have $61,000. So you play with that tool and adjust it so that it meets your annual needs and no more. So you know what you're committed to right from the jump, right? Every single year you know what you're committed to. And a big chunk of that is paid for by the energy savings, which we guarantee. So if we have designed something incorrectly, therefore you're not able to yield the savings to make the payment, not only do we have to write a check, but we have to fix the problem, more importantly, because we're either going to write a check every year for the next 17 years, or we fix it and stop writing checks, right? Believe it or not, we've actually taken over projects or districts where boiler rooms have been piped backwards in like a low bid bonded project. Companies come in, they bid to the spec, and that's it. They're not even looking at anything, they just build the boiler room and things are piped backwards. This legitimately happened several times. So if something like that were to happen, which obviously, we'd try to mitigate that during the process, but we own that responsibility. No change orders in the process, unlike a bonded project or a low bid project. And that's a real thing. That's a real statement, and ask any of those. I could give you 20 references right now, just last year alone, with school projects where something was missed on every single project. You're talking about existing infrastructure that, 50, 60, 70 years old, and we're going to be replacing that equipment with new, and nothing ever goes, Humpty Dumpty doesn't always go back together like it was before. And things are missing inherently. Contractors, we missed 100 valves on a project one time, and it cost us $94,000. That number is near and dear to my heart because I remember that phone call, and that was 3 years ago. So when you say no change orders, you actually mean it. There is no change orders. And you also don't have the time to go back to say, who screwed up and missed this? That doesn't matter at this juncture because you have the summer to fix a heating plant and get the classroom ready for custodians and teachers to return to school. So we just fix it and then worry about it later. So again, when you look at the whole thing from no change orders to the financing, the guaranteed savings, holding the cost, that's what I mean by this is, without question, the most fiscally responsible way of doing projects.
I think one of the questions I heard was, what's the cost of the audit itself? So if we continue on this path and we walk away, is there a cost for the audit? You've come in, you've done.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, that's $0. That's the $0 buyout.
We negotiated it down to $0.
Wasn't there another question to follow up with that, Jana, with?
Joel had asked, and members of the community had said, they wanted to know what the cost of the audit is, if you think of it as accrued labor that we're putting forward. And my answer last week, and Tom can correct it, my answer last week is that any project that we would undertake, whether it's insulation in the roof or whatever we were doing, we would have, if we were doing it the right way, we would have to do those audits anyways. So we've provided them with a whole bunch of data that we already had. We just had a roof scan, we have our electric bills, and they have had, from what I understand, 2 engineers who have come in and they've taken what we've given you, they've done some of their own metrics, but at this point you haven't brought in anybody really from the outside that's done, the work.
There's been a few recommended.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, so the $0 buyout is not something we really don't. If we did about $25 million in just school projects in New Hampshire and Maine last year, in one summer, like these, that's a lot of projects. I bet you 90% of them were not $0 buyouts. We usually put something in the letter of intent. That was something that Jana and your administration had negotiated with me, and because we understand we're trying to wait until you guys have formal votes down the road, and I totally understand that. And that is a partnership and a customer agreement thing because we're a known entity. You're a known entity by our company. If you were a new school system, there's no way we would do that. We just know that we have a relationship with you guys, have for many years, and we're okay with that. Again, the amount of money you're spending is only what you're looking at in terms of the design, right? So that's why this energy audit, okay, say it's $100,000 to do an energy audit, or give me a per square foot cost to do an energy audit. That is a kind of a goofy proposition because you're going to be looking at things you're never going to do. So why give a per square foot cost and generate bills for things that you're never going to realistically look at or do. So the amount of money of the audit when we're done is purely just based on the measures that we've been focusing on. And then the others, maybe that's a phase 2, phase 3, like we've done with almost every school systems, you know? So that's, again, you're only spending the money that is necessary, not money based on, because when you do another project, you got to redo the analysis, you got to redo the calculations. We're guaranteeing the savings. So by state law, we have to, and it's in our contracts, to show you our calculations on everything. So we put in a new pump, we show you the calculations on how we got there for the guaranteed energy savings. We insulate the buildings. We fill in the cracks of the windows. We have crack infiltration calculations. So based on the gap of the crack and the amount of the heat, and we've data logged the buildings for 3 weeks. For every 15 minutes, we know what this building is doing with our own data loggers. So we've got really good information. No sense to do that all over again in 2 years, because you're spending your money again. So you just wait until that might be necessary, then you do those calculations for that wing of the building for windows or the roof or something. You know what I mean? So the cost you encumber is really only the things that you're going to look at during the project. So it's literally about a third the cost of a typical audit, even if you were to pay for it. Hopefully that makes sense. But
And I think the concern is that if we move forward with a project, we are going to pay for it. But what is that going to look like? How much of that gets rolled into the project? Is there a ballpark dollar amount? Because I think the concern is that somehow it's going to grow, and while you need to show it to us, the visibility folks want the visibility up front, as opposed to, well, we're going to vote on this and then find out how much it costs.
So it's sort of an unfair question, because we don't know what you want us to develop yet. So the total cost, if you're gonna, so here's another reason why it makes more sense financially, because we've done thousands of boiler replacements in schools in Maine and Hampshire over the past 30 years, right? We've done thousands of controls replacements, panel upgrades, windows, roofs, you name it. I mean, we've literally done brand new kitchens. We did probably 10 new kitchens last year alone. We know what things cost. So we get you what we call a one-line or 30% number, a budget number on just about everything, by going through the buildings, of course, but not engineering everything all the way through to encumber. A typical boiler room might cost you $15,000 to actually engineer design, so you can send out to the street to get bids on it. If you were to hire just a third-party engineer, it would cost you that for one boiler room. That we could do that for like a couple $1,000s, know exactly what needs to get done, and have enough information to get qualified bids without spending all of the money. You wouldn't spend all the money to stamp drawings for a new boiler room, because we're not certain that boiler room is going to fly for this phase, right? So why spend $15,000 when we could do it for $1,500 or $2,000, get the right design, get the right bids, qualified bids, know what the plan's going to be, put it all together with all the other measures, and then let you decide what you want to do. Once we know what that scope looks like, then you know the total cost, because then we are going to we're going to get a third-party stamp on the boiler rooms, we're going to finish the drawings, and then we can determine, okay, here's what your total costs are going to look like. You know what I mean? So again, it prevents you from spending too much money that you're never going to use. Even if you're going to roll it into the project financing. It's just not a good way of doing it. So
I was going to respectfully make a request. I know we don't have another section for public participation at this point, but I was going to ask if you wouldn't mind opening it up to public participation, because two of the people that had questions on this are here, and I would like to give them the opportunity to ask questions while we have our expert here.
Yeah, that was my plan.
Okay.
Thank you. Do we want to, you can just maybe stand next to
Sure, this right here.
Stan.
Just got 3 quick, brief questions. The first being, and it could be a yes or no answer. If I understand the RFQ correctly, any engineering studies or engineering costs that we're incurring now in these audits, if we go with the performance grant, will be rolled in to the contract, correct?
to the financing, to the lease purchase, right?
Okay.
Yep.
That is a correct statement?
Yes.
Okay. On the annual guaranteed cost savings, I'm hearing different yearly numbers being put out there. What is the actual annual guaranteed period if we go into, say, a 15-year contract?
Well, it starts when you sign off on the contract as complete, substantially complete. So when the project is complete is when you sign off. That's when the guarantee starts, right then.
For how long of a period?
Every year that you maintain your financing. And so it's governed by the International Measurement and Verification Protocol. Everyone has to follow it. That's a qualified ESCO. And you have to show your calculations with the cost to measure and verify annually. Every year you have to prove your savings through a report. We do it in person. We do not just send a report. We deliver it in person to your administration every single year once the year is up.
Okay, so do I misunderstand the RFQ incorrectly when it says the annual contractual guarantee will be provided for the first 3 years of the contract, and then there's an option to continue that guarantee thereon?
Yeah, so you don't have to continue to pay for measurement verification to guarantee the savings every single year. You can, after a few years, if you're feeling pretty confident in the savings, that you're seeing it in the budget, it's pretty solid the way things are, there's no faulty design, then maybe you elect to cancel that guaranteed savings report, and that's okay.
Okay, my last question is on the energy audit, if that's the correct term to work, that's going on now with your personnel in the school.
Yep.
When did that start?
I mean, we've been doing stuff in the buildings for years, but technically we did a formal kickoff, I think,
December.
Well,
just a couple weeks ago.
yeah, your letter is November 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else? Did you have a question, Mary?
Actually, we have one.
Okay, all right. I just can't see over there.
Just one more time, let's beat the rug one more time. Zero cost energy audit whatsoever.
Right.
But for the lack of a better word, you're running up a tab now for things that are going on to get us to the next phase. And at some point, the dollar amount associated with your current and ongoing work has a dollar amount, and that's going to be recovered by your company in year 3, 4, 5, or 6, whatever, project by project. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, how we're paid as a company is like a general contractor, except that we're guaranteeing the work of every other contractor as part of the project. So it's kind of much different from that perspective, where we own the responsibility by everyone, but we're a publicly traded company, and it's a 10 and 12% company. That's how we're paid, as overhead and profit. But yeah, the cost of the audit or the analysis is really determined once you pick the total cost will be determined when you pick your total scope of work. You know what I mean? So
We have an opportunity to review that before. Is that information forthcoming before you start any project whatsoever?
Oh, yeah.
Or do we get to the end of the project and say, oh, by the way, it's like a couple $100,000? I think my concern and the concern of people that I'm talking to is we don't know if your work that's going on now, which will be spread out over projects, is 2,000 or 2 million. We just don't know that.
yeah, no, that's the nice thing about this process, and I totally get it. Beat the rug, as you said, as many times, because until you do a project, then you'll see it. It's very, very unambiguous. There is no lines of ambiguity anywhere, especially cost. And we only get paid once as a company. You're not obligated to payment for us for years. Our performance or recovery of cost is not spread out over years. We're paid, like I said, a 10 and 12% company, like a general contractor, only that we own the risk of everything 3 years, however long you keep your guarantee in place. But you're not obligated to pay us anything from there on out, even service. You're not obligated to keep us for service. So after the project is complete, you are not obligated to stick with us for a day longer if you don't want to. But yeah, absolutely. When you call the school districts, and if that happened where you were kind of slighted with cost, I don't think they would tell Bethel, this is a great way to go, right down the road, and you're part of the same superintendent's conference, that we got slighted by $200,000. That would be you do that one time and you wouldn't do another project in New England. So facilities directors are part of the same groups, superintendents are the same groups, business managers same. Everybody talks about this stuff and this process and how you guys are doing capital projects and infrastructure. I mean, we're well aware of that. That you can't do that kind of thing. That would never fly.
I totally understand that. I think where I was coming from, and again, the people that I've chatted with have said, we don't want a surprise at the end to find out, maybe you go and you look at a half a dozen windows and you've got $150 a man hour in it. That's fine. We can recover that. You get into something that your analysis alone is going to take months. I don't imagine you folks work for like $10 an hour kind of like thing. So what we want to do is find out if you get something that's going to encumber 1,000 hours, just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
At $20 an hour, which is cheap, that's a lot of money. And yes, we're not writing you a check for that.
Right.
But the money associated with that encumbrance is giving us back less savings for a longer amount of time. In other words, at the end of every year, fiscal year, we'll get a little bit less because you're getting a little bit more, if I understand it correctly.
No, we're not, again, we're not paid every year by savings. There's no shared savings, anything there. We're paid so say it's a $10 project, we're paid 12%, 10 and 12%, that's how we get paid. We're not sharing the savings. The savings of the project goes directly to the school district. The only thing you're tied to, and like I had said before, you're not even really tied to the finance because of the non-appropriation, but you're making a payment to the bank. We're setting that for you and then we're done with it. We want to stay here in service, but based on merit, not because you have to have us. You are not sharing any savings every year, not giving us a little bit and taking a little bit less. None of that stuff is being done. That's probably a miscommunication on this process, but there is nothing you are obligated to us ever again after this project is complete. And when you're talking about generating numbers for projects, if you're going to do an analysis by an architectural and engineering firm, and there's plenty of them out there that are good, you're going to pay a lot of money to do those analysis, right? Talk to Hopkinton. They had done a huge one with a big engineering firm. We took that report and we did the analysis. It was a heck of a lot less cost, and we actually focused on the things that were going to happen. That made sense. The district probably doesn't have money to do all of the windows in every building. So we'll be chopping that up to say, okay, what can we fit into the project? How much can you afford to do, basically, Is it just half the building? Maybe we do the street-facing side first, then maybe do another project down the road. We do a lot of that kind of stuff. But if you're going to get competitive numbers for a boiler room, you have to get engineered drawings. So that's done by licensed engineers, and you'd pay a third-party engineer to do those measurements and those calculations and analysis. At the end of the day, you're going to pay a heck of a lot more than you'd pay us to focus on the things that you're going to do inherently.
One final question. It sounds like you've been in and out of all of our buildings. Henry Wilson itself, the right-hand end of it, if you're facing the building, is probably almost 70 years old, and the high school opened in 1961. The bricks and mortar of there, will that be treated when you're doing your analysis, and where you advise the board, I think you really should concentrate on your newer buildings. Do we want to sink X amount of money into Henry Wilson and find out in a few short years from now that we need a new building, or we need to do add-ons to the two newer buildings that we have? They're not all treated, all buildings obviously shouldn't be treated the same. Your oldest building should, it's kind of a catch-22 because your oldest building is the one that's costing you the most energy-wise. But do you sink a boatload of money into it and find out it's going to be paved parking lot? So will that come into your analysis as you're going to be presenting to the admin team?
Yeah.
You put a little less weight on that, or at least consider the ages of the separate entities as they are now.
Oh, yeah. You break all that out, and you basically determine, once again, order of magnitude, the things that are eminent in terms of repair and most needed. structural integrity of a building is going to be paramount from that perspective, right? A good example is Oyster River. We did their first project, and their middle school had been on the sort of chopping block, if you want to call it, for years. So don't spend a ton of time there, but don't neglect it, because what if the taxpayers decide that they want to keep that and not building a new school, right? So you still give it attention, because you got to keep it fair and balanced amongst all the facilities. Because the teachers inherently want to know, hey, if you're going to air condition that school and we didn't even have anyone look at our building, what the heck gives? And why are we less important than the other? So you got to look at all the buildings equally, but you definitely have that from a forest for the trees mentality where, okay, maybe we wait. Oyster River Phase 2, what we did on that analysis, once again, we did a lot of projects, a lot of windows, brick and mortar on all the other schools, but their middle school, we basically did an analysis on what would it take to make this building, not that we're going to do it, Siemens, but it was probably a third the cost of a full report for us, because they had priced it out, for us to do an analysis and tell them, based on doing all of these measures hundreds of thousands of times, what's it going to cost us, the taxpayers, if we just do a huge bond on just that building to bring it up to speed for ASHRAE standards for a healthy classroom environment and moving forward. And so we did that. We did that exercise. We came up with millions of dollars in measures, and we presented that to the board. And even though we would have done that report, that work, I think it was like $16 million, it was our recommendation that they shouldn't do the work, because the structural integrity and the way it was set up, the way they have like 5 different boiler plants, the whole building's a nightmare, the way it's spread out. It made sense to go with a new building. So continue to pursue a new building instead of paying us or any contractor $16 million just to do HVAC-related windows, roofs.
So sounds like you're looking at the ROI, return on investment of a building of that age versus spending that same amount of money in a newer building with the possibility of either abandoning Henry Wilson and putting additions on, sending kids out of district. Some of those things will all come into it. That was another concern of mine, because when I was at what is now called Henry Wilson, it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
And I'm talking, never mind.
We build a lot of credibility with schools, and that's why we've done so many subsequent projects. You wouldn't there's districts we've done literally phase 5 and 6 with. You wouldn't do that with a school board if you didn't have credibility and you didn't do what you said you were going to do for the past 2 decades with certain school systems, right?
I don't think any of us here are questioning that. I'm a newbie. I want to know, what's it going to look like in 5 years or 7 years or 12 years?
Right.
Or what? And with the experience that you have, hopefully you'll be able to look at that and say, if we cast out in that direction, we're not going to get anything.
Yeah.
Those are the types of questions that we're going to be looking for and following as the projects move forward.
Yeah, we'd rather see you guys pump the brakes and do several small projects. I say small, they're all big at the end of the day, and we totally get that, trust me. I mean, I'm a taxpayer in my town. We've done 2 performance contracts, but I was part of that committee choosing what to do, and we would rather do multiple projects than just one huge one and disappear and you never see us again. We're here servicing your buildings after the fact, so we better do a pretty damn good job, or we're here every day. You got to let us know, if something's not working. So we would rather see you do what makes sense now, fix all the immediate problems, post it up as potentials for a subsequent projects, phase 2, phase 3, and then in accordance with what the budget looks like in the coming years. And maybe a thing where you skip 1 or 2 years, but then you can do another one in 2023 or something like that. We'd rather see you do it that way than do way too much. You'll never get a decision to do a project, first of all. When you do something too big, I mean, people are going to be like, whoa, $10 million. That's not going to,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just to stifle any rumors, we're not planning on building a new building. Hasn't been a conversation.
Throw it out there, because at some point we might.
You're right,
We
that
always
comes up.
said we'd never build a new elementary school either, and look what we've got, so.
Yeah.
I just mean in recent conversations, it just hasn't been in there. Anybody else have any questions before we move along? Thank you very much for coming.
Hey, if there's any, email me. You could give my contact information out. I just love going to school board meetings, so, But seriously, any questions down the road, email me. I'll get right back to you. We've got engineers going through here, but there's only 2 of them, so we're not racking up a bill, I promise you. So,
And they are accompanied.
yes, they are company right there, yes. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, good night.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
All right, moving on to the budget review, default budget review.
Okay, so you have a copy of the default budget that you had seen last week. What you have here are the summary sheets, and you will notice that the total is $10 different from what you had seen before, because there were the $1 line items that had been added back in last year that we needed to make sure were in place. Mrs. Mellon and I spent some quality time with our attorney going through line by line to make sure that we were clear on what could be added, what could not be added, what was where. If you would like to see the full text of where those $10 fit exactly, I mean, if you look at, it's primarily lines 15 through 18. But if you need to see the other breakout, I can print the other 30 some odd pages for you. But
I'm good with that.
Didn't do that for tonight, feeling that the summary pages were probably a better use of trees. I do have the sheets for the default budget. If you are ready to sign this tonight, I have those ready to go. If you need some time to look at that, as it was tabled last week, that is certainly your prerogative.
Go by the board's wishes.
If you need a moment or two to look at it.
Yeah, I don't mind.
So the first piece that you have the summary pages, and then the next 2 pages are the total sheets that Mrs. Mellon used to true out those numbers. And the $1 addition needs to be by 100 object code, not by each line.
Okay.
So.
Why is there $6 in community education?
Because last year it was added by each line by the budget committee,
Okay.
and so because it was there, it gets carried forward, but it's,
It's just a odd
it's
number.
an odd number, yes it is.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions?
I guess just so that the viewers at home know, it looks as though the difference prior versus the default, it's down $75,892.79.
Actually, the
that right?
default is higher than the prior year adopted operating budget, due in part to salaries that are negotiated as were previously negotiated.
Just the bottom, the grand total.
The grand total.
Between
Oh, I'm
what's
sorry, I thought-
proposed and what the
okay.
default is.
Right.
Do you have numbers, actual numbers?
Yep.
Yeah, I've got a whole pages of them. Which one do you want?
Do we have
You want
any extra
bottom line?
copies?
The default budget, the bottom line of the
Yeah.
general budget?
All right, the general budget is, I don't have that one.
The general operating, well, for, right now for the default, $15,702,210.21. If that is what the board chooses to adopt.
And what is the
Proposed is what?
proposed budget?
I have that right here, I think, is
My budget guide.
$882,376.03. I believe that's, correct me if I'm wrong on that one.
Was that 14, the first part?
15,
15.
yes. So the operating budget again is
15 million.
15 million, thank you. 882,376.03.
And there are, again, a couple of
highlights.
the 15s and 16s in the general operating budget that did not have line items to add the dollar into. We can do that, should you so choose, because those hadn't been built into the general ledger because it's not typically where we have spent it. But that can be done. So, because it had been added as part of the budget committee's process last year, but it's not part of our general ledger. So we can build those lines.
Yes,
That would
please.
be appreciated.
All right. So that would add $4 more back to the general operating budget to cover those lines. So that would increase by $4.
Okay.
Should you choose to vote that tonight?
I just wanted to make one point of clarification, though, just for the board. When you're looking at this final page of the default budget and you see the prior adopted budget of a number there, and you see a smaller number in the default budget, I just want to make you aware that the prior year adopted budget, because of the way we have to enter it, does include warrant articles.
Right.
So
that's the prior year adopted budget in March. That's not the general operating budget that went forward.
So
That's the final operating
the
budget in March.
15,778,103.
right, that
Yes.
that includes transfers to capital reserves and transfers to expendable trusts.
So all warrants.
Yes.
Right.
Would it then be closer to the next column to the left, the actual? The
Well, if you
14?
look on, if you
That's the actual spent, that's not the
Okay.
actual. The adopted for 19 was the 15,018,589. That was
Okay, so
the,
that's the actual number that the default was?
The last year's budget was.
that was the adopted budget.
The prior year adopted budget, if you're comparing apples to apples, just for the default, if you look at this sheet, this grid one, it's probably easier to see it. So the first two columns have to do with the default budget. So just look at the second column. I can explain why there's two there, but the bottom line number is the same for those two columns. The third column over is the prior year adopted budget. And if you look, the total for the operating pieces, if I take out the warrant articles, are compared on that total line. What went on the ballot last year, you take that total and you add the grants that were appropriated and the food service operations, and so that 16,636,587 is what went on the actual warrant, Article 3 last year for operating. So if you're looking at the comparison, we, you can look at either the total or the estimated operating budget that's at the bottom for comparison between the two.
Another note on the default, as it goes into the DRA portal, there is not a line on the DRA portal for the 2900s. And so that's why you see two totals there, because the 29 was wrapped into the 2800s as it was reported in the DRA portal.
Last year.
Yeah. And so the two different columns there have the same total at the bottom, but it's broken out to show it as included in the 28 and separated out.
Oh. Can you just remind me again what the 2,900 is?
2,900 is the.
It has to do, it was a
Workers'
choice.
comp,
Years ago, they used to spread workers' comp and unemployment into each cost center, and a decision was made, I don't know how long ago, to pull it into the 2,900s for accounting purposes. So that it really services kind of the things that cover the whole district, insurance pieces,
because we get a single bill for those. So rather
makes
than
sense.
trying to guess how much goes in each cost center,
Right.
it's one bill for workers' comp, it's one bill for unemployment insurance.
So going forward, it'll be its own line, just the 2,900?
It's in the 2,900.
Okay.
Yeah. What we have to do when we report it is basically we split that 2,900 out over the other cost
Right.
centers. But last year, it was only added to the 2,800. So in order for you to compare, that's what I did on the default. In your operating budget, that 2,900 has been spread. When I put it into the portal,
DRA
it's
portal.
spread.
Ah,
Okay.
gotcha.
You'll still see it as 2,900 on your reports, but when DRA just doesn't have a
place to put it.
put that.
And I wanted to make sure that it didn't look like last year's 2,800, which is technology, was increased by that much more. It was not. That included the insurances that were there.
Okay.
There are no one-time costs in the default, correct?
We went through that line by line.
Line by line.
There was over 10,000 that was taken out as one-time costs from there, though.
Quite a bit more than.
Anybody else have any other questions?
So technically, the 16 million is what the default budget will be read, not the
Yeah,
50,
on that
not the 15
grid-
million we just gave
Right.
Tim.
Yeah, that's the operating budget.
That's
When
the
you put it on,
operating-
when you put it on the warrant,
Alright.
you have to add those other
So-
pieces in.
Right, so so when you see on the ballot, you're gonna see a default of 16 million.
Correct, because
You
that
won't see the 50.
includes
Yeah, okay.
the grants and the food service.
Right,
They're part-
that'll be added
we
on
have
to
to-
it.
yeah.
Operating budget.
We have to do, and we would do that in the operating budget as well, so.
Yes.
If the proposed operating budget.
So the proposed operating budget and the default budget both have those pieces added into them. Because we have to raise and appropriate that part as well.
Stan, do you have any questions?
I don't.
Are you comfortable signing the default budget tonight?
I am.
Mr. Lewis?
Yep.
Ms. McElhenney?
Yes.
And yes, so
Okay.
we will sign it tonight.
So do we want to do a vote to accept the default budget?
I will entertain a motion to accept the default budget.
To
by
accept the
Mr. Frieda.
full budget as presented with those corrections.
Do I have a second? Oops.
Oh, that's the-
I will second.
By Ms. McElhenney. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There are 5 copies.
We have to sign on 5.
We have to send originals around.
I'm gonna leave Joel the top one. All right, so do we want to,
Do you want to sign
Going?
afterwards?
yeah, let's sign at the end of the meeting. And we'll just keep going. Warrant articles. Are we prepared for warrant articles tonight?
We are not fully prepared for warrant articles. The general language has not shifted beyond changes that were made last week. We do have numbers for CBAs. We've not voted on the second CBA yet. And we cannot give you the full numbers for Article 3 because the operating budget number that gets rolled into Article 3 comes from the Budget Committee.
Okay.
And we won't have that until at least January 15th. That's when the public hearing is. Snow date is the 17th, hoping for the 15th.
Can I have a motion to table the warrant articles?
So,
Motion by Mr. Frieda,
Second.
second by Ms. McElhenney. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we have some policies. And there are second reads. We have GBK, staff concerns and complaints, and GBKR, employee complaints and grievances. And at first glance, I'll take a motion to accept them as a final read. We can discuss them. And second by Mr. Lewis, he's nodding his head.
Yeah.
All right. Why do we need this? That's,
These and the progressive discipline policy both, these are primarily addressed in our CBAs for those groups that have a CBA. We have employees that are not covered by a CBA.
Okay.
And so these are general language around how staff can address concerns or complaints, what the procedure would be, and then a progressive discipline policy, again, that is outlined for staff that is under a CBA but is not outlined for those that are not part of a CBA. So
do these go in line with the CBA?
they are general, they do go in line with the CBA. What it does is it provides protections for those that are not under a CBA, and GKR is actually required by the Department of Labor, while it is not required by the Department of Education.
Right.
So
GKR came about because we have a safety plan that's required by the DOL, and we're supposed to, update that. And the Department of Labor has changed the guidelines on what they expect, and they have a new section on progressive discipline, meaning that if somebody flagrantly doesn't follow the safety procedures, there has to be something to hold them to in a process to make corrective actions. So.
Did these supersede the CBA? So if there's something in here that's not in the CBA, do we follow this?
we would follow the CBA. These are really more in line for those that are not part of the CBA.
Okay. I hear your words. My concern is that we should hold everybody to the same accountability.
These are, I mean, certainly we can put these out to the different groups to have them take a look at, make sure that there are no specific concerns that rise from this, and I'd be happy to do that.
What are the major changes since 2006?
There really aren't changes here. We haven't had any of these in our current policies because it's been covered in CBA, but not everyone is covered by a collective bargaining agreement. But I'm happy to send these out if you would like me to do so.
Does anybody have that desire? I do. I think it's important that the groups get a chance to look at this and make sure that it coincides, because I think policy,
I certainly don't want to.
If we're going to set policy, I think the policy should cover all staff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I just have a question. Under GBK, staff concerns, complaints, the second paragraph, a concern or complaint is defined as an alleged material violation board policies. Does that mean of board policies or administrative procedures? Is there a word missing there?
There would be an of missing there, yes. Thank you.
So are we tabling these till the next meeting?
Yes.
So you have
Until the 6th,
opportunity-
or shall we say the 27th?
No, 6 is fine.
Okay, well, looking to get feedback from groups. We
They
have
won't be in
the
school
Christmas
very long.
holiday coming up, the winter
Can I
break.
give you
agree.
these now?
Merry Christmas.
Homework.
What's your druthers, the 6th or the
No.
13th?
Be the 27th would be the other meeting for January.
I agree with that one.
The 27th? The 27th?
would have to meet.
All right, the 27th. How's that?
Yeah, so the 6th would be better.
Good.
The 6th
Gives
is
just a
better?
cou-
Of January?
Or the 27th of December?
No, 27th of January.
January.
Oh.
Or January 6th?
January 6th or 27th.
Christian, are you now?
Sorry, I thought we were all in January, the 27th,
Sorry.
okay?
27th.
27th, okay.
Thank you.
Just for those.
So I'll
Thank
make a
you.
motion to table.
A motion to table by Ms. McElhenney. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Lewis. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right.
Yes. Are we doing BEDG?
Would you like these electronically?
No.
Doing,
I had only asked for these for Mrs. Barron when she had given me some questions, so I think we went over these fine. I wasn't looking to readopt them.
Okay. No, I wasn't thinking, we didn't actually discuss them, they were tabled last week.
Okay.
So,
But I
Because you
thought
weren't
we-
here.
Right, but I thought we had discussed them. Did you want to talk about the minutes at all? No? Or access to them? Okay.
so we're good on that, huh?
We are.
Keep cruising.
New business. We already did the first
Just the
one.
agenda.
Acceptance of revenues, Henry Wilson Robotics Grant.
yes, okay, I got it. So, we've received 2 robotics grants. The second will be coming to you at a public hearing that will be on the other side of January because
Okay.
that is over the $5,000 threshold.
That's exciting.
It is exciting. But this one we can look at tonight, so I will give you, get my copies of my letters here. Beside them? Okay. Pass those this way.
I think they're in the packet. So I'm good.
Oh, they're in the packet?
Yeah.
You have a copy of the letter?
Okay, I'm looking at one.
So if you look at the bottom, the very bottom there, you have a total. We have received $2,872 for the Henry Wilson Robotics Program. This was a grant that we weren't sure that we were going to be eligible to apply for. It was a competitive grant. And we're pretty excited to be able to kind of infuse a little bit more energy into that program. We did have to curtail some of our numbers this year because of the number of robots that we had available. So we're looking at additional kits, being able to expand and make sure that the kids' experience in competition is robust and sustainable. So, and then the grant that we have coming for the high school, I'm hoping to get on the 6th. It may end up being for the 27th, but that will be part of a public hearing.
All right, so this grant is in the amount of $2,872. Do I have a motion to accept this revenue? So moved. Motion by Linda, second by Mr. Frieda. Any discussion?
Who oversees this?
Giselle Pomeroy is the grants manager
Okay.
for that. And Misty and I are helping her out as she's cutting her teeth on her grants management. And then she's also overseeing the programs with the advisors to make sure that that's.
So there's a stipend attached on top of this?
There's a stipend attached.
It's included in the budget?
The advisors, not for the grant manager.
Okay. There's no,
And that's already in the budget.
Yes, yes.
there's no 15% for somebody to oversee it type thing, right?
No.
Okay, good.
Nope, there is not.
That would kind of suck that grant very dry.
Well, lots of times it's in the grant, but
Mhm.
just to put a stamp on it, basically.
No, no. The only stipend that is here is for the advisors.
Okay.
And the work that they're doing with kids.
And those have already been approved?
Yes.
Okay.
They have. For Henry Wilson, it's Jen Thomas and Brian Hall. For the high school, it's Chuck Trainer and Shannon McCarkin-Barber.
Okay. They haven't competed yet?
Actually, the
one.
high school has
I
competed.
know there was one
Yep.
somewhere, UNH or somewhere, I saw that.
Yeah.
So,
They went to Battle of the Bay. I believe they came in second. It was,
Good.
they did very, very well.
these are things we would like to hear.
Yes.
Any further discussion?
Oh, no, not on this, no.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
While we're on the topic of acceptance, we tabled at the last meeting regarding a fire tablet. Any,
That I'm gonna need to, it stays tabled because I'm still working
Okay.
back around with that.
nope, just touching base.
Thank you.
And then the other one I just had was a bid acceptance for security cameras and swipe card system.
We are still working with the vendors on that, so I do not have that for you tonight.
Nope, just double check.
Nope, thank you.
All right. Moving right along, the audit committee workshop date?
So I brought back the materials for you. I still have not heard back from my contact in Wyndham. so I can't give you a set date of when she might be available. But I did bring back the materials because you had asked to see when that, have them a little bit more readily available, so. If you wanted to set a date, we can go the other direction, or we can clear calendars and see when I might be able to have somebody here.
Do we want to give her like maybe 3 dates that were available so that she can have something to choose from? So that we're moving forward
Yeah,
versus.
I'd like to at least try
A
to.
little less
switch in.
nebulous.
Yeah.
That would be good.
So where are we going? What kind of, are we talking an evening?
And at one
Like
point, a
a
Saturday had
Thursday
been
evening?
discussed,
A Saturday?
but that was a discussion point. It didn't mean that it was
I must have
chiseling
missed that
granite.
day. Do we want to do a Thursday night since we know we can get Stan here? Is Thursday nights good?
Other than the library, and I don't think I have any budget meetings on Thursdays.
Okay,
Just
so
not
which
the second.
Thursday?
Just not the second one.
Yeah, we already got a plan for that one. So 9, 16, 23. How about those three? January 9, 16, 23.
Those are all Thursdays? Nice.
Those are all Thursdays.
And at what
9
time?
is the 2nd, so I can't make the 2nd. I can't make the 9th.
You can't make the 9, so the 16, 23, 30.
16, 23, 30 works.
What time can you guys be here?
6.
6?
Possibly push 5:30, but that might be tight.
If we have someone driving up at 6, maybe probably the earliest.
All right, 6 o'clock.
Okay.
So why don't you throw out those 3 dates so
All
we
right.
can get something
Okay.
on the book?
I will see what I can do.
I'll get those dates to Joel.
Now, just to refresh my memory, this first date is with the board just to discuss first steps, creating the charter and how we go about it, who we want, okay. Just
It
clarifying.
becomes a workshop.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, choose a delegate for the New Hampshire School Boards Association. I really did appreciate all of you guys tabling that so you could, not go with her.
Who's not here tonight?
I brought that.
I see Joel's not here tonight. It must be his turn. I am going to decline because I have
I have no
a
time.
previous commitment. Anybody else?
I am going to decline as well.
I don't have a problem going.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I
Stan.
guess we should have just said who.
We do get
Yeah.
a delegate and an alternate if anybody wants to be an alternate. I'm not sure whether the alternate is just an alternate in name or an alternate goes. It's not
Yeah.
clear on
Do
that.
you want to be the alternate, Linda?
I will be the alternate. Thank you.
All right, so there you go. Are we doing,
So my question on that, Stan, will you be communicating that to the School Board Association, or is that coming from me?
I don't know, but there was just a link to register, so I could take care of that.
Okay, all right.
I don't know if they'll inform you or not that I've done it, but
Okay, I have no idea.
yeah.
Okay.
But I'll register.
Are you registering for both, or checking to see during that process if Linda needs to register herself, or?
Yeah, I'll call and find out.
Thank you.
But Linda can't go. You can't make it.
I can't make it that day.
So
So
if I-
then for
if
you
I
to be
can't
the
make it,
alternate really doesn't
It
mean
doesn't
much?
really matter, but.
Okay.
Well, in an emergency, you know.
He's not here.
That's what I'm saying.
And again, I don't,
Teach him to be an
it's not
officer.
clear whether they expect 2 people to go with 1 delegate voting, or
Right.
they just,
Okay.
someone goes in my place, like I went in Penny's place at one time.
Okay.
yes, thank you.
So, but I'll find out
Okay.
and let everybody know, but I'll register.
All right. Are we doing anything else in old business? Is there any other old business?
And the manifest, did they get the manifest
I
signed?
have the manifest.
There was another public participation.
And then
Yeah, I wanted to say we are going to talk about contracts a little later, and I just wanted to thank the teachers union and the custodial union. I had the pleasure of working with both of them this year, and it was truly a pleasure. It was collaborative. It was a great experience, and I think that everybody took care of business, and it was amazing. It's needed to.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yes. Any other public participation?
Tim Brown from Melody Lane in Farmington. Just want to start up real quick. I was hoping you guys would have gotten into warrant articles tonight. Obviously, you didn't. One thing I'd ask you to keep in mind is adequacy aid. Last year, our initial grant of adequacy aid was $5,514,599. Added to that was the $620,702 one-time payment. So that gave us a grand total of $6,135,501 that we received last year. This year, our initial adequacy beginning step was $5,000.
5 million?
5 million.
5 million, I'm sorry, 949,971. Added to that was the 950,789, which is actually an overage of 765,259 over last year. So as you're going spending, comparing apples to oranges, we're getting a grant of 950,789, but we're actually receiving 765,259 more dollars than last year. So anything over that 765,259 potentially can affect the tax rate. The other thing I would encourage you folks to do, and I don't know whether anybody ever looked at it this year, but it's sitting in 4 years in a budget committee. Last year, fund balance, there was about $980,000 returned, ballpark numbers. I don't have that number in the back of my head. And additionally, we funded out of fund balance $250,000 in warrant articles. So there's almost $1.2 million money there, and there's $765,259 here. The Budget Committee's function is an appropriation committee, and they can start cutting. And this year is a unique situation because potentially there's $2 million on the table that, in their mind, they can cut without impacting what we offered for educational services last year. If that happens, then the 10% rule potentially kicks in because there's so much money on the table. You wouldn't see in prior years a budget committee saying, we're going to cut $1.5 million, therefore the 10% rule never potentially kicked in. This year you've got a lot of money in fund balance, you've got a lot of money that we funded in warrant articles, and you got $765,259 in additional adequacy aid education. So potentially there was $2 million to play with in this year's budget to reallocate to, better our education. Kind of what I saw in the budget is we went status quo. So you may have different, the folks on that committee take their function seriously. I think they do a good job. There's a good mix. But they're going to be looking at numbers, and they're going to be looking at hard numbers. And there's a lot of money there that as they adjust numbers, you may want to go to the workshop as a committee and listen to concerns. So if you hear them say, no, we don't want to build the yellow brick road for $500,000, or you can do your warrant article, which you're legally entitled to do, but we're going to start cutting your budget to offset and return some of that money to the taxpayers. Depending on where those numbers go, could have a devastating effect on your budget next year. So I'd encourage you as a board, and I know Linda's a rep there, she's done a very well job there, but as a board, I'd pay very close attention to those numbers, because depending on where the number rides, we may be adding a deliberative and say, we're all done, we've exceeded the 10%. Because you can't appropriate any more money than 10% of what the Budget Committee recommends, and there's an awful lot of money on that table this year. So that was just my comment.
to let the board know, I will be attending the workshop on Wednesday. Kind of invited myself, and they were gracious enough to accept me.
Yes. I know, and I'll just speak a little bit to that, we have had some conversations about warrant articles and some needs in the district and how we can fund our performance contract for maybe that being an option. Starting a CRF for a potential road, for a study. So we have had some conversations about the needs of the district with those funds, especially the 765 or that number that from the state. So we have put in some good thought, and the administration is working on some solid ideas to best utilize the funds, not only for the taxpayers, but for the students here in Farmington. All right. Our next meeting is
January 6th.
January 6th. I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday.
Merry Christmas.
Yes. And we'll see you back here in the new year. We truly appreciate your time and effort on behalf of our school district. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will entertain a motion to go into non-public session 2
So moved.
under RSA 91A, 3 for nominations and resignations at 8:09.
And that was Mr. Lewis and Mr. Frida?
Yes. All those in favor by roll?
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
See you in 2020.
Welcome to the roaring 20s.